Good morning and good evening, everyone. This is Rabbi Menachem Penner, and it's my pleasure today to introduce a discussion on Rav Lichtenstein's famous The Ideology of Hesder, to revisit that famous piece at a very critical time in our country's history. I'm here both representing the Rabbinical Council of America with our president, Rabbi Tzvi Engel, and we are both, of course, Talmidim of Rav Lichtenstein as well, and friends of Rabbi Sachs as well. So that brings us here on many levels. We're going to have a discussion in just a moment by Rav Lichtenstein, the Rosh Yeshivat Har Etzion, Rabbi Jeffrey Sachs, the very talented editor of Tradition in its many forms. If you are on this podcast, but you are not yet a subscriber to Tradition, I ask you, why not? You can go right now to traditiononline.org, subscribe to Tradition, as well as sign up for the newsletter, for the various emails. Tradition is today. Tradition of today is coming out in many different forms, both in print and with many, many weekly and daily hits, things from book reviews to comments on society today and much other very important material. And if you happen to be a rabbi on this podcast, then you are not yet a member of the RCA. I ask you, why not? What are you waiting for? You can go to rabbis.org. The RCA is doing, Baruch Hashem, so many new things. There are 12 new initiatives just this year within the RCA, trying to allow rabbis across the globe to be able to help Klal Yisrael where they are, in the way they are serving, to support them in every way possible, to make sure that together we are supporting Klal Yisrael. This Zoom event is taking place around the world, but I would assume that most of those who are tuning in are either from America or from Eretz Yisrael. And it's either 11 a.m. or 6 p.m. as you are watching this particular Zoomcast. Ki seitze or ki teitze lemilchama alevecha. Reish Lakish tells us in Maseches Gittin that ki can mean a lot of different things. Ki can mean at least 4 things. Ki can mean certainly when, and ki can mean if. Those of us who are watching from Chutz La'aretz have a much different sense. It's difficult for us, even as we watch moment by moment what's going on in Eretz Yisrael, even as we visit, even as we spend time doing what we can to visit those who are in hospitals and those who, chas v'shalom, are sitting shiva. For us, the word ki strikes us as an if. It's difficult for us to think so much in the way of war, whereas those who are living in Eretz Yisrael, it's a when, unfortunately, and it's a greater part of the reality of civil life. Of course, the role of the Hesder Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael plays a critical role, not only in terms of manning the army with some of the best soldiers, but also in terms of shaping the worldview of those soldiers. Rav Lichtenstein, writing in Techumen many years ago, wrote, Keitzad menahalim et hamilchama af keshehi mutzdeket. How do you carry out a war even when it is a just war? And wrote, Chashuv biyoter shahadam hayotze lemilchama Yodea she'enhu over me'olam ba'al sulam erechim echad, le'olam ba'al sulam erechim shoneh. Person has to know that when they leave the yeshiva or they leave society and they go into the army, they ultimately don't come into a place of chaos, into a place of lawlessness, into a place that lacks values. Adam echad ve'uma achat einam yecholim lehitpatzel lishnayim. B'chol hamatzavim tzarich sheberosh sulam ha'erechim ya'amod hashalom. With that, I turn over to my distinguished colleagues, Rabbi Jeffrey Sachs, Rav Mosheh Lichtenstein.
Thank you, Rabbi Menachem Penner. And if you'll permit me a word, it's wonderful to have you at the helm of our organization, leading the RCA, giving us support and guidance and friendship and help at everything we do at Tradition, which is, of course, an important project of the Rabbinical Council of America. And we're grateful for your newly joined role with the organization and for all of your wisdom.
Thank you so much.
Rav Mosheh Lichtenstein, Rosh Yeshivat Har Etzion, teacher of so many of us here online, son of our great Rebbe, Rav Aharon Lichtenstein, who, writing in the pages of Tradition, one of the many contributions that he made over the years, all of which are, of course, available in our archives. And for those of you in the Zoom on the chat, there's a link directly to the article under discussion. And if you haven't reread it now, we invite you to read it after we're done discussing it. The Ideology of Hesder was published in 1981, over 40 years ago. It seems like a very long time. It was not only 4 decades before our current conflict, it was 6 months before the Lebanon War, the first Lebanon War, I'll point out. So when we look back at this very important, both ideological, theoretical, as well as practical and applicable statement by Rav Aharon Lichtenstein, we have to ask, in what way does it still guide us? In what way has it become somewhat dated? How have the realities of our life changed? Among the things he points out is that the physical survival of the 3 million plus Jewish inhabitants of the state of Israel are at stake, and therefore this is something that has to be wrestled with, how we manage the hesder, the arrangement of our responsibilities to the population. Of course, now we're talking at more than double that amount of Jewish people, over 7.2 million Jewish people, and that's just talking about numbers. So, Rav Moshe, as we turn to you to first begin to think about this essay from the archives, and then maybe even more so this evening as we spend about an hour together to think about the reality of Israeli society and the strife that we've been experiencing both before October 7th and certainly during this almost nearly year-long trauma. How do we look at it? Rav Aharon wrote that hesder is not some kind of simple accommodation or arrangement, as we might think the word literally means, but rather, he writes, a compromise with reality. We do occasionally argue with the generals over details, and they do not always sufficiently appreciate the preeminence of the spiritual factor. The basic concern with security, however, is ours in the Beit Midrash, no less than theirs. But then he goes on to say, of course, that concern must be balanced against others. Knesset Yisrael needs not only security, but spirituality, and ultimately the former for the sake of the latter. Those who, by dint of knowledge and inspiration, are able to preserve and enrich our moral vision and spiritual heritage contribute incalculably to the quality of our national life. And of course, in reading these words, like so much else of Rav Aharon's writing, we're just inspired by his ability to articulate, to cut to the heart of the complexity of existence. So in this question of the military needs, the spiritual needs, of finding a balance, of finding a hesder, how do you interpret what he was saying back then 40 years ago, and how do you see it playing out in a different reality? If, as he says, it's a compromise with reality, we live in a very different reality than 1981. Rav Moshe.
So first of all, Toda Rabba, and thank you very much for inviting me to participate. It's always a pleasure to see so many people and many familiar faces and names on the screen, or to meet you on the screen, I guess. Secondly, it gave me also opportunity to reread the essay and to think about it again. I'll say like this: hesder is predicated upon 3 assumptions. Number one, that Talmud Torah is a crucial value. Number two, that serving in the military and Tzahal at the moment is an important value. And number three, when you have two conflicting values, conflicting in terms of time, conflicting in terms of many other elements, you have two conflicting values, you have to create dialectic. If you look at Israeli society, some people deny, number one, the importance of Talmud Torah. Some deny, and that's a secular challenge to Hesder. Some deny the importance of the state, of serving the state. That's the Haredi challenge. Others deny. Others recognize both values, but deny that when you have conflicting values, that you resolve them through a dialectic. Rather, you choose either A or B. And that's really the challenge for the Merkaz Harav crowd. From their point of view, Torah matters and Eretz Yisrael matters, but you take the tzibur and you divide them. Some go to, like someone once said that either you're 20 years in yeshiva and become a Rosh Yeshiva, you're 20 years in the army, you become a Tat Aluf. But you should choose either path and don't try to merge the two and to create some kind of balance within the individual. Hesder is based upon all three. All three of them expressed in the article. My father makes clear there his value system regarding Torah versus Medina, but he clearly articulates this idea of a dialectic. He does, of course, much more in other articles of his. There are other articles in which he expands upon this in greater detail. And I actually think the article should have maybe elaborated a bit more upon this. That's regarding the ideology per se. I'll just add two comments, or maybe three. First of all, the article is more focused upon the Haredi challenge, not so much at the beginning, but when he discusses the proof text and when he goes out of his way to emphasize the fact that halacha doesn't dictate staying in yeshiva and not going to the army. He's basically challenging the Haredi perspective. At the time, there was much more contact. Religious Zionism at the time had much more contact with the Haredi world. Unfortunately, that contact to a large degree no longer exists. So there's much more, besides family weddings, the occasional cousin that you argue with. There's very little interaction at all. Certainly, almost no interaction on the hashkafic level. It's chaval. My father himself, Rav Amital, once told my father that he met Rav Shach at a wedding. Rav Shach and Rav Amital were mishpacha, and Rav Shach commented to Rav Amital that we've moved so far away, we no longer have to fight anymore. And my father mentioned to me after Rav Amital told this anecdote that he had a big Yitzhahara, or Yitzhahara Tov maybe, to pick up a pen and send Rav Shach a letter. Maybe let's get close enough so that we can begin to fight again. And unfortunately, that's the situation, though. And therefore, I'll say like this: I think that the article is relevant, but it's relevant in theory. There's no acute need now to refute this because no one is interacting with that. On the other hand, the challenge in contemporary Israeli society, both from Chiloniyim and from Datiyim Lumiyim, religious Zionists, is why not do 3 years? And this is a point which he discusses much less in that essay, but I think it's crucial to understand, not only, first of all, to understand the background. The background is that 40 years ago, I think Israeli society, secular society, had two qualities which are you find them much less nowadays. I'm not saying they're non-existent, but you find them in much less people. Number one, the value of serving the army. To a large degree, the complaint is nowadays that Hesder doesn't share the burden. There's what they call chalukat hanetel. There's not enough sharing of the burden. This, of course, assumes that military service is a burden, which is how it's viewed by many contemporary Israelis nowadays. It wasn't viewed like that 40 years ago. When serving the army was a privilege, you did not complain so much that other people were not partaking of the privilege. When it's a burden, not a privilege, So then you're angry that others don't share the burden with you as well. So partially, this tension is a reflection of the change in secular Israeli society and this attitude towards military service. It also reflects its attitude towards Torah. I think 40 years ago also, the idea that Saba Sheli Haya Rav, and that I have some kind of tenuous connection to Yiddishkeit, and that it matters to me. Rav Vital used to say that Chilonim don't want a Shabbos Goy, they want a Shabbos Yid. In other words, they want somebody to be Shomer Shabbos, just not themselves, but they're interested that there should be some kind of tradition, and the legacy of Torah and mitzvah should be, should animate the Medina. That's you find that much less nowadays also. So if you don't if military service is a burden and you don't recognize the value of Talmud Torah so much, it's obviously you don't understand why people studying Torah should not be relieving you of part of your burden. That's the secular community. I see myself something, so vakasha.
So I want to unpack that, particularly since we have many people online with us from abroad who may be less fluent in some of the details of exactly how Hesder works today. Your contention is that 40 years ago, there was this sense that serving the army is a privilege. So the fact that the religious Zionists, the Hesder community, served, but perhaps were in active duty a little bit less than general society, was a form of partnership. And the fact that the Haredi world, smaller as they were back then, didn't serve at all, set us on the general side of the ledger against the Haredim. And today we see this phenomena where it's reversed. I'm curious for your thoughts on why general Israeli society has made this kind of mental switch from service as a privilege to service as a burden. But if that's the case, so then the religious Zionists, the Hesder yeshiva students, who in fact do serve less time in active duty, seem like freeloaders in the eyes of general society, more akin to the Haredim, who don't serve at all because we serve less. And then into all of this mix, add another phenomena which wasn't at all on the scene in 1981 when Rav Aharon wrote the essay, and that's the rise of the Mekhinot, which, although they've become very, very varied and serving all types of communities, began in the late 90s as a religious Zionist enterprise in which boys would study in Mekhinah, which, looked very much like a yeshiva, but then do full 3 years of army service. And that somehow, if I understand you correctly, creates a kind of further wedge between the Hesder world and general Israeli society. So I laid a few things on the table here, but what do you think led to these transitions? What led to this idea that defending the nation is now a burden like paying a tax instead of a privilege that a citizen does on behalf of a greater sense of collective goodness?
Okay, so you raised basically two main issues. One is the secular community, one is the religious Zionist. Since the focus will be the religious Zionist, let's try to take the secular one. So let's address it briefly and then get off the table and move on to the religious Zionist. But that, I think, is the crux of the issue. Let's like this. We don't have enough time in this Zoom to discuss all kinds of trends in general Israeli society. Broadly speaking, it ties into the fact that, and now let me just qualify that everything I'm saying is generalizations. And I'm talking also about shifts in emphasis, and not from 100 to 0, from black to white or white to black. I'm talking more in trends and al derech harov. But I'll say the following: Israeli society used to be much more, so to speak, a vertical, meaning it felt the connecting line was to the past. Tanakh, right, the Zionists of 80 years ago, they were very Jewish, not religious, but first of all, of course, fighting religion is also a form of attitude. But beside for that, they look back to Tanakh. Ben Gurion's model was Tanakh, and everything went back. Jewish, they had a deep sense of Jewish history, and therefore, if Zionism was, many people tell you Zionism was a religion itself, and there were many religious elements in secular Zionism, including Mesiras Nefesh and quote unquote Kiddush HaMedina, and think of people literally going to the gallows singing Hatikva, which is akin to Kriyat Shema, really, if you think about it. When they felt very connected to the past, so they saw military service and realizing Jewish history, like Brit Avot was the animating force. Nowadays, once more, I'm talking generalizations, but there's much more. It's a horizontal line, not to the Jewish past, but to Paris, London, New York, broad general society. I'll just give you a quick example from contemporary Israeli society. If you go to Kikar Hatufim, the hostage square, whatever you want, in Tel Aviv, a good deal of the expression of deep, deep emotions is through art. Very little Tanakh. If you go over there, there's very little Tanakh, very religious imagery or traditional texts. It's almost all poetry, visual arts, plastic arts, which means when the contemporary Israeli, and I think that's a relatively good mirror of contemporary society, when they want to express themselves, they do it through art, I think the framework of reference is often what goes on in other, like in Western culture. So because of that, it's I think you've gotten more distance from classic Jewish sources. I'll just add, the past year or two, with all that's been going on here with the judicial reform and the like, there's much more contact with secular Israelis, and like as the current trend is, and mitzvat asay shazman dramat, to be in WhatsApp groups with with secular Israelis. I have been impressed how much they view their values as Jewish values. When they fight for democracy, when they're fighting for a certain judicial concept, they see as Jewish values and not as just democratic or universal values, but as Jewish values. And it's been heartwarming, and I find it's been encouraging. But nevertheless, when all said and done, their Judaism is translated to democracy, and not much less into Shaul HaMelech or David HaMelech. So that's why.
To say nothing of ritual matters and mitzvot.
Right. So let's leave it at that. I don't want to say too much, but also I think at the end of the day, the clock is ticking. I'm going to religious Zionism. There's been a deep transformation with this Mekhinot. When my father wrote this essay, the essay was addressing the Haredi challenge, because classic religious Zionism at the time was I said before, was in dialogue with the Haredim, and now it's less so. Now, this is partially sociological. Each community already has critical mass to build its own communities. My shver, who was a religious Zionist, he went to Hebron, and he davened in a shul where half of the members were people like him, whose children went to Har Etzion or to Merkaz Harav or whatever, and half of them went to Hebron and to Ponovich. And nowadays, I daven in a shul, everyone sends their kids to religious Zionist institutions. And my brother's children all daven, together with Haredim. There's almost no, there's something much deeper though at work, which is that Rav Kook's vision took over Eretz Yisrael. And Rav Kook's vision, nationalism, is more or less on par with Torah. I mean, let's not argue exactly now about the nuances of Rav Kook, but I'll just tell the following anecdote. My father once got a ride with Hanan Porat. They were together in the same cab. And Hanan Zal reads my father a passage. Hamedina hi ha'osher ha'yoter elyon. The state is the supreme happiness value. And a few more sentences which I won't quote now. And he says, "My father, what do you think about it?" So my father says to him, "Shocking." He must have mezazeh or something like that.
The idea that the state is the supreme value.
Right. It's a famous passage from Orot, penned by Rav Kook, no more, no less. So if you read a few more sentences down, he talks about the Medina Yehudit. But nevertheless, it's pretty clear that he's identifying, the Jewish state, which is it's beginning to become, in his, the reality he's aware of the Jewish agency and like that. He's treating that as Osher Telion and Kiyam Tzviyuda and Hanan Parat, and they clearly saw it like that. When nationalism becomes a supreme value, you can now fulfill your religious, you can be over Hashem through tzava and hityashvut, no less than through Torah. In Chutz La'aretz, because of the Rav, because of the whole Litvish derech, because the Lithuanians established the whole school system, the whole educational system is Lithuanian, basically. So Talmud Torah is a supreme value. When I went to high school, and I had Haredi educators, so if you want to be serious, it's Dal Amos of Halacha. And now when you have educators who come from Merkaz Harav or Eli or from that whole worldview, so kids are being told that anything which expresses nationalism is an equal footing with Talmud Torah. So you can now go to Mekhinot and feel that you're fulfilling your religious obligation no less than if you went to yeshiva. Now, this ties to other stuff, which once more, I think we don't have the time to get into it, which is the good deal of religious Zionism. The Zionism is what they suck in their mother's milk, more so than the religion. Someone once said about a very well-known yeshuv, it's not 100% true anymore, but it used to be true 100%. Yatsumi Sham Lom Adat Lashim Ve'aflo Smalani Echad. In other words, not everyone there remained from, but everyone remained on the right, because one was considered a choice, obviously an important choice, and their parents educated them to choose Bacharta B'chayim, but it was a choice. While being Yemani Smali was not a choice; it was simply that's how the sun rises.
Right.
And
that's certainly my experience with youngsters that have left the path. But they haven't left a kind of ideological path. They haven't left a nationalistic path.
Even youngsters who haven't left the path. I'll take, for instance, 4-year-olds are told in Gan that they have to stand on the Tzvira and Yom HaZikaron because it's kadosh, right? And so 4-year-olds, they insist. And so on the other hand, no one's told about mitzvot, like touching a tree on Shabbos or whatever. No, what do you want to? He's only a 4-year-old. Like why do you expect him a 4-year-old? They should be so such stringencies, and he'll grow older. You teach him all of halacha. Like halacha is not taught as a fact of nature. It's taught as so you people are opt into. While Zionism is taught as you don't opt into it. You are placed there, and at the age of 4, you conform. Right. Now, now, obviously, it's paradoxically, even though people claim that Hesder is a more convenient thing, it is more convenient for most people to do 3 years in the army in terms of self-image, in terms of it's like this. And if you view the army as not as something you're going to do, it's psychologically more comfortable to be in the army than to be in the yeshiva for a variety of reasons. And because of that, you take a 12th grader, he go to Mekhinot, do 3, and then do 3 years. He's much happier. It's like this. I have to convince Hesdernikim not to do 3 years, and people in Mekhinot don't have to convince them not to do Hesder, which means psychologically that's what the pendulum is. Psychologically, in the comfort level, etc. Now,
let's just explain for some of our listeners that these details. When we say to do 3 years, that means to do full army instead of the arrangement with Hesder, where you're in and out of yeshiva and you're combining that with your army service, but overall you're serving actual less time in active duty.
So now, just to wrap this all together, I'll say the following: when Lumiyut, and when nationalism is equated with Avodat Hashem in the highest level, when I say society is more there, once more for many reasons that time does not allow to get into. When it's more, it's more convenient on your comfort level. So then obviously people will expect you to do 3 years. Now they come with complaint that that's why if you can do Mekhinot, so it's, as long as people thought that you cannot, that military service was incompatible with Avodat Hashem, so then Hesder was a logical choice, and everyone did it. The moment that you have a choice, that you have a different track which is compatible with Avodat Hashem, both
Mekhinot.
that people don't go off the derech, and also optimally that they're fulfilling the highest level of Avodat Hashem, but because according to Rav Kook, this is the highest level of Avodat Hashem. So what you have is an alternative which is seen as preferable, and then people point the accusing finger, why are you doing only 17 months? And here I want to turn the tables, and I'm sure my father would agree with this 1,000%. I tell kids, the question is not why are you doing Hesder? How can you justify doing Hesder? It's only 17 months. The question is the reverse. How can you justify not doing Hesder? Because you owe it to the Kadosh Baruch Hu, to Am Yisrael, to your future family, to yourself, to develop yourself as a Ben Torah. We need first of all Gedolei Torah who are connected to society, who are in tune with society, who are open to the modern world and engaged with it. We need communities of Bnei Torah who, and at the end of the day, I think Mekhinot produce fine over there Hashem, but they don't produce Bnei Torah, meaning people who sit and study, who sit and study Gemara, Be'iyun, and study Gemara seriously, they don't, because they don't advocate for that to begin with. They advocate for a different value system. They pursue fine, idealists, wonderful people, but they don't produce the idea of people who are immersed in Torah. And in order to, and therefore I said to people, the question is not why you're doing Hesder, the question is why you're not doing Hesder. I spoke today at 11 a.m. this morning, 11 a.m. my time. A kid came to speak to me. He spent 2 years in yeshiva, wonderful years, etc., etc. He came to thank me, and now he's going 3 years in the army. And so, of course, I encouraged him to continue learning. I told him about tracks, how he continue learning when he's in the army. But I really think, lechatchila, he should have stayed for the 5-year program. And because the dialect, in other words, your obligation to Torah is paramount, and it has to be, and you have to discharge both obligations.
Right, but we that was a very impassioned argument for the necessity of Hesder, even now 40 years later. And the question is, full army, some Mekhinot program, and now there are so many different tracks of Mekhinot where it, and there's so many yeshivot Hesder that have Mekhinot programs built within, and so much gray zone between them. It's not like it was in the late 90s, early 2000s, where the divisions were much starker and clearer, or doing Hesder. So Rav Moshe, you've just made this very articulate argument for why Hesder is the best option of all, but that's within the realm of people who are looking to find a way to continue Torah study, to build themselves as Ovdei Hashem, for the present and for the future of themselves, their families, their communities, and society, and to still fulfill their responsibilities to serve and to protect. But that's still setting the Haredi world, who almost universally, even now, does not serve at all. And of course, over the last year, we've seen, some very difficult tensions rise. It cannot be filtered out of larger political conversations, which of course are very, very cynical and have to do with larger concerns, which we're not going to settle here tonight in the time that remains to us. But part of what the essay in the 80s was doing was making an argument for, frankly, the illegitimacy of Torah only, given that we live in a world where Jewish life is at danger. And if on October 6th, it looked a little different, if we were already having conversations about, we don't need everybody to go to the army, and after all, we knew that anybody that didn't want to go to the army, secular, religious, or Haredi, had easy ways easy ways out of it, and there's no end of anecdotes illustrating that, because all we needed was one fellow sitting in a basement somewhere operating a drone on a joystick. It was better than a whole battalion and all types of other things, which we now realize, was a false hope. That in fact we really do need people, and we need them badly. So how does this, at least given the current reality, and we hope the current reality will end od hayom, but that doesn't seem to be what's going to happen. How do we now look to that? Since you did make this point that once upon a time, the religious Zionist world and the Haredi world were much closer. You mentioned that when you were a student in Netiv Meir a few years ago, in one of the finest Dati Le'umi religious Zionist yeshiva high schools, almost to a man, your rebbes, your teachers, were all people that came from the Haredi world. Many of them were still Europeans. That's no longer the case. This creates distance. This creates lack of understanding. It creates just simply the lack of, as you mentioned, the kind of just common cause that you find when you meet your relatives who are of a different stripe over a kiddush or a bar mitzvah, and these fabrics are breaking down in society. So looking towards the right, how do you see these tensions playing out? How do the arguments from 1981 still hold up in the face of the current strife around Gius Haredim?
Okay, I'll start with the following statement. I think the arguments stand up perfectly well. They were true then. You mentioned it was written a half year before this, before the first Lebanon war, but it was also written. That means like 8 years after B'chad Yom Kippurim. There was the sense of loss and tragedy was there. I think people don't realize. My father came to Eretz Yisrael in 1971, and he was 37 years old. 2.5 years later, he was confronting the loss of 8 talmidim out of 200 students. It was, I mean, it's hard to imagine what, and like, I don't think anything prepared him for that. I don't think anything in YU had prepared him for that sense of, the role of Rosh Yeshivat Hesder. So even though he opens a very rosy picture, and the loss was still very. I should mention that 1981, that same year, we lost a Talmid in a training accident, and these things were. So, I think the arguments were valid; they remain valid. But I'm an educator, and so was he. As an educator, you try to educate your people in your community, in your family, in your group. What are the odds of my being able to educate Haredim? Very little, because at the moment, regarding this issue at least, we have different axioms. In other words, my starting point and their starting point is different. So if I come and preach to a packed crowd of to 1,000 yeshiva bachrim and a big beis medrash, but they say to themselves, he's coming from a different point. His starting point is different. So it's like water for duck's back. It'd be meaningless because I'm not in my community. I can engage in dialogue. I can educate. So therefore, to be honest, I don't pay too much attention to that. What's my opinion? They're wrong. How can they look themselves in the mirror? I don't know. But what I'm trying to do is to mold my talmidim in my community to where it should be, and let the Haredi. So if Haredi will come and talk to me, I'll be glad to. But since I just
doesn't happen that frequently.
It happens very infrequently. I can tell. I remember once. There's only one real time where someone called me for advice and then to consult. Aside from that, here and there, but with the summer we talk about, how do you plan your bakiyos? What do you, we talk about common issues, but within the framework of learning. So
but let me.
I mean, it's like this. Maybe politicians should be busy, railing against the Haredim and attacking them. I think two things. Educators should try to work with what they have, with the hand they're given, and not with the hand they're not given. So as an educator, I focus upon my crowd, and as they say, Zabaya Shalahem. That's now the second thing is that I believe also It's like at the moment, to best as I read the map, there are two groups trying to get Haredi to join the army. The first group is working on ideology and everyone, etc., etc. The second was pragmatic. It's like this: if we talk in terms of justice and the ideal world and absolute justice, the first group is right. If you talk about let's be pragmatic. The army needs more boots. It needs more people. It needs more chayalim. So what will achieve more results is the pragmatic approach. I've met the person, the Tata Aluf in charge of this. I met him a few times. He's a very nice guy. I think he's pragmatic also. And what he wants is not to make a sweeping statement about justice in the world. What he wants is another 1,000 chayalim. And I tend to agree that I also think for many, many reasons, I think if you get the first 1,000 through the door of the Riskat Giyus, it'd be much easier to get many, many, many more. In other words, once it becomes an option, so then I think many more will come. But I'm just saying, I don't want someone else. I just think we should deal. We should deal at the moment with our community, and that's my.
I will just say I don't mean to challenge you on this, but it's something that you and I have discussed privately. Yes, it's true. A Rosh Yeshiva has a responsibility to the hundreds or thousands of students in his base medrash, and it's your job to communicate your views and values to them, klape pnim. But you have, on occasion, spoken out. Most recently during the judicial reform crisis, which is still hiding somewhere under the surface. Simmering under the surface, but was, of course, so roiling the country just days before October 7th. Your father, Zichrono Livracha, of course, was an important moral voice, klape chutz, on a whole variety of things, even as he saw his main responsibility educating inside. So we do speak about these things, and even if what we speak about in terms of other communities is a way of communicating our values inward.
No, my response is, you can say it's a cop-out. My response is, I think, certainly myself, I think it's the habit of my father as well. If you look at all his pronouncements on public issues, the communities who are interested in hearing his voice, meaning the religious Zionist community. So he wrote his letter about the Goldstein funeral, and he wrote his letter about
Rabin's assassination
and the like. Secondly,
some of those, by the way, were published in English in our pages in tradition.
Secondly, he thought, correctly so, that there were intellectuals in the Filoni community who were interested in what the religious people have to say.
Do you feel that's different now? Do you feel that's different today?
No, I don't. But I don't think if you look through all my father's pronouncement, you'll find him attacking the Haredim. I think that the defects that you point out existed 40, 50 years ago as well. I don't think this article was written to justify, to our community. It's more apologia in the Socratic sense, but to justify to us. I don't think you'll find him attacking. He commented what he thought about the deficiency of Haredi society regarding no parnas and the need to knock on doors all day long. He thought they were wrong not serving the army. He had a lot of criticism. He never went public with it, and the reason he never went public is because he really thought they weren't going to listen. He went public
but again, in this article, it's not fire and brimstone, but in this essay, which quite interestingly, we should mention, was written.
Okay, good. I understand your point, but listen. First of all, he didn't pick up a pen to address the Haredi community. Why aren't you going to the army? He picked up a pen to justify to his students why they're going to Hesder. So as he was discussing the topics, so obviously, when you understand what you should be doing, you understand they're wrong in not doing it. Secondly, let me ask something else. And how many Haredi read this article and went to the army? Probably zero.
Yeah.
So I think educators work, and I think that was his politicians.
I accept that. Again, like I said, I wasn't trying to prod you, but to
no, yeah,
we do of course always welcome. We do of course
article to discussing the role of the educator, but I certainly feel like that, and I tend to think he did also.
Okay, so no, it is interesting, of course, to know that this essay was originally written and published again in tradition in English, and then only later translated and slightly adapted and expanded in a Hebrew version. At that point, I think it was already after the beginning of the Lebanon War, and that maybe recast some things. In Hebrew, of course, it was called Torat Chesed, which
No, it's called Zodat Hesder.
Zot Torat Hesder. But it's interesting that he chose, for a variety of reasons, because of the organization that stands behind the Yeshiva in America had asked him to do this. But it was interesting that he articulated his ideas first for the English-speaking audience. So, because we do have, of course, very many people joining us, I think principally from America, but from outside of Israel. Let me ask you, what would you say? What do you say to our American friends, our British friends, all of whom feel as deeply and are as pained as we are here, but of course do so from a distance. And the nature of being at a distance means sometimes you lose some of the nuance or the deeper daily ongoing understanding of what's been unfolding here for years. So from within the base medrash of Har Etzion, what do you think it's important for somebody in New York, in London, in Los Angeles to understand that they probably are unable to pick up from the remove about what we've been experiencing?
Okay, there are two points which I think answer your question, and even if not, like Israeli politician, I'm interested in talking about them. But I tend to believe that they do actually answer the question. I think if I asked about Hesder in the article, and now in like in 2023, 24, Tufshin Pei Dalid, first of all, I'll address the positive. The basic idea of Hesder was a dialectic. Now, the dialectic has to give expression, or has to allow you to realize two differing goals, which are tension with each other. Now these two goals here are Jewish history, protecting Jews, serving, fulfilling your obligation to protect others the way they protected you, etc. And the other one is Talmud Torah, building a spiritual world for yourself and for others, spiritual leadership, etc. Now, of course, the main problem with Hesder, and one which the article addresses briefly and much less, because the article was interested really in justifying doing 17 months and was less interested in justifying not doing 32 or 36. Now, as we said before, in contemporary society, the main challenge is why doing only 17 and not 32 or 36. So on one level, the answer is dialectic. You try to Yotze Yidei by doing so, as the Rav would often point out, by trying to achieve two values, each one is done imperfectly. Or to use a metaphor, if you want to drink 2 cups, you don't drink. You can't drink 200. You can drink 80% of each. So instead of 200, you have 160. So rather than drinking 100% of one cup and drinking 0 of the other, you end up with 160, which is less than 200, more than 100, but it's imperfect. And now that's the answer on one level. But another level,
you can't have all of both.
Yeah, I tell kids when I teach the Rav, I teach the only man of faith. When I tell the kids in yeshiva, I tell them, imagine for a moment the person, he has this beautiful hot cup of tea, with a steamy cup of tea on Shabbos afternoon. And then he has a glass of Coke full of ice. And now you can drink the Coke and enjoy it, Me'en Olam Haba, or you can drink the tea and have the same thing. What happens if you try to take a sip from the Coke, a sip from the tea, a sip from the Coke, right? So the chill of the Coke ruins the tea, and then the heat of the steam of the tea ruins the Coke. So you end up 160. But nevertheless, what you have an idea what each one is. If you drink only one, you only have one value. Okay, that's part of the answer. But there's another part which is no less crucial, and which the past year has been so powerfully imprinted upon our souls. The real share of the burden is not time it's life. And he writes to say, Abun de Kulu Dam, the real division of labor happens to be the willingness for sacrifice. Hesder, by matter of ideology, and because the army also requests this, we send everyone who can, not those who lack the physical ability. We send everyone to combat duty, or what's called the Sherut Kravi, not computers, not not whatever, and then everyone who can goes to Kravi. You mentioned the first Lebanon War. I was there. I can show you on the screen pictures of myself in Lebanon with darker hair I spent months in Lebanon, straight from Hamafki Dafam Zayin, ended up and it doesn't matter, in Chazita Mizrachit. But the real sharing of the burden is the willingness for sacrifice, and I think you're much sharing the burden when you do 17 months, and then you are, of course, for 30 years or 25 or 20 years, you are in Miluim, and you're willing to go to battle. Then time is important, and of course, every Rosh Yeshiva will tell you that time in Bittul Torah is important. But it pales. It doesn't even pale. It's insignificant relative to life. And the past year, when my father, I said before, my father came to this country. He lost 8 Talmidim Chadam Kippurim. 3 years later, two more Talmidim were killed in terror attack in the Golan. Then came the Lebanese wars. You can see there also. There are 5 chevra from. No, excuse me, 6 from Lebanon.
6, yeah.
Yes, I remember them. I remember them. And this year, the same thing happened this year. Hesder, which is so maligned, etc. I can tell like this: the yeshiva emptied out of Simchas Torah from Shir Gimel and above. We were empty. Instead of a triple-digit number of Talmidim from Shir Gimel, I had a single-digit number. We had the whole winter. And not only that, every single member of Tzidot, including all Bogrei Hesder, the entire Hesder Lidoroteha was mobilized. I have 3 sons-in-laws. All of them are Hesder graduates. All of them were spent months, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The real sacrifice, and unfortunately, if you look at the names on the bottom thing there, the all Bogrim, almost 5 of the 6 are Bogrim. The 6 of the, we paid a disproportionate price in terms of the real price.
For those that are,
someone called me in January to complain the Hesder is not doing enough time, and I said to him, before I answer, let me just get off my chest. We've sacrificed so many Talmidim. I mean, the entire yeshivot is there. We paid our price. Other yeshivot paid. I don't know the exact number. It's probably 30 to 40 Hesderikim in total who lost their lives. And I'm not even talking to that this past, and not in November. Yesterday, Motzei Shabbos, I spoke to a Patsua who's still in the hospital. So that's the real share of the burden, and therefore I don't have too much sympathy for people, who don't do kravi and then they complain.
The journalist Yair Sheleg, who may be known to people that follow the Israeli press, who himself is a boger of Yeshivat Har Etzion, who writes, written in many different, but now he writes mostly from Makor Yishon. He just published an interesting book called Hachut HaMishulash, which takes some of his reporting over the years and tries to focus it in light of the last year on what's happening, trends in the religious Zionist community here in Israel, and degrees to which the religious Zionist community is fulfilling its historic mission, and frankly, ways that he thinks it's falling short. But he mentions this statistic that, depending on how you count, religious Zionists make up about 11% of the nation. And they make up about 40% of the noflim, of soldiers who have fallen in battles since October 7th, meaning almost 4 times per capita the the percentage, and it's nothing to brag about. But on the
I
other
just like
hand,
this,
yeah, but
I try to talk. No, I think it's better not to talk and not to count. I think it's for society, it's horrible that people go around counting no fleeing. All I can say is that if I scrupulously try not to count them, I will say it's not the fact that
but
factually
there's an awareness that there is a sacrifice that's being made, and it's very real. And when I came to visit you a week or so ago in the yeshiva to talk about our conversation tonight, I was stopped in my tracks. Countless times I've walked in and out of the Yeshivat Har Etzion Beit Midrash, and of course, those of you that are watching the video see the memorial plaque that's at the entrance to the Beit Midrash. To many of you, of course, you've passed this many times, and it has the names going back to the Yom Kippur War, the 8 soldiers who fell. That, as you described, had such a profound that experience had such a profound impact, traumatic impact on your father, Zichrono Livracha, and on Rav Amital. Last summer 2023, we published a special issue, 50 years to the Yom Kippur War. We thought we were talking about ancient history. Of course, the issue came out days before the current war, and the past is prologue, and everything that was written there by Rav Sabato, by other people, by people looking back on those experiences, it all came back to us with this alienated force of how relevant it tragically became. And we translated a piece by Rav Amital. It was a sikha that Rav Amital had given in 73, in the early weeks of the war, in 73. And then we published a companion essay written now by Yehuda Mirsky, who I'm sure is known to many of us, about the impact of the war and the loss of those students on Rav Amital's thought and on his Zionism. And as I was walking into the Beit Midrash the other day, I saw that, Katsar HaYiriyah, there's no longer enough space on this memorial plaque that whenever it was conceived, however many years ago, who could have imagined it would one day get filled up, and you'd have to add this little supplementary plaque at the bottom with the names of the six Talmidim of Yeshivat Har Etzion who have fallen only since October 7th. So, Rav Moshe, if I can ask you, and pardon me for doing this, for putting you on the spot, if I can ask you a very personal question. Let's imagine this is just you and me without all these many, whatever it is, 100 people listening in. The last name on this list is Zechariah Pesach ben Aaron and Miriam Haber, Hashem Yikam Damo, who was by all measures just a remarkable human being, a remarkable lamdan, remarkable thinker. He was the son of mutual friends of ours, of Aaron and Miriam Haber. I stood just a few feet behind you in that massive crowd at Har Herzl at his funeral. And you'll pardon me, my eyes were on you because I could only imagine what you were undergoing, what it means to be a Rosh Yeshiva, what it meant for your father, for Rav Amital, for the Rosh Yeshiva and the teachers of so many, of hundreds and hundreds of Talmidei Hesder, of Talmidei Mekhinot, teachers of students that go 3 years who also fall. What has this experience now meant for you? How has it impacted on you? You were a chayal, you were in war, but now you're sitting in a different position. As a Rosh Yeshivat Hesder, Rav Aaron ends the essay, what would the Rambam have given? What would the Rambam have given to have been a Rosh Yeshivat Hesder? So zachita to what even the Rambam wasn't zoche. So how has this experience impacted on you as we're now approaching 1 year in?
I don't know. First, I'll just, you mentioned the sign. I'll just add 2 quick points. If you put the sign back on the screen for a second. What you are unaware of, the left part was never there originally. The original sign was only the right side. This already was an addition, unfortunately. B'ezrat Hashem, this is you can't see and you can't see it. This is really it's not a temporary edition because it's styrofoam. And the reason I say this is we do not yet want to finalize the sign.
God forbid more names should be added.
Liba the Puma Logalia, but it's at the moment. Look, it's been a very difficult year. But please don't quote me on that. In other words, that we don't finalize. I ask everyone here, don't quote me on that. But I'm just saying it's.
But we know the way of the
It's
world.
like this.
We know
It's
the
been
way
it's
of
been a
war.
long and difficult year. Zachai was in my share for an entire year. If you look at Ari Zendelman, who's also on that sign, he and Zachai were in the same year together. I taught them both in the same year. I have a picture in my office, both of them in happier times, in a group photo that we took of the whole share at some point. It's been difficult. It's been very difficult. It's been sad. It hasn't impacted upon me in the sense, I changed my ideology or my teaching methods or my perspective on life. But it's been very sad. The sense of the deep connection you feel to your Talmidim. It's a much deeper level. That when you go to a funeral and you have to bury a Talmid and you have to see all his friends over there crying with you. It's difficult. I don't have the word. I'm not a poet. I don't have the words to describe it. I guess it tears a part out of you, maybe. But you feel and look. You mentioned Zachariah. Another 2.5 weeks. There's Askara that Askara should have to give in his memory. It's an ongoing involvement. So if you ask them, Rosh Yeshivat is there. I can say the past year. I've had two emotions. One of them has been deep satisfaction that we were able to continue the voice of Torah despite all of the difficulties, because those who the Chutz La'aretz, the younger Israelis who haven't gone up to the army yet, we were able, under trying circumstances, we were. It's not only the Talmidim, all of us had family members in the army. Some of like Ramadan, his child was tragically wounded. And the fact that we're able to continue learning, and I said to them countless times, you owe it to yourselves to learn for your development. You owe it to all the Chayalim, to all Am Yisrael, and you owe it to Jewish history. You owe it to Jewish history to learn in trying times, because people learned in much worse times in the past. Throughout the Galut, and there's a deep satisfaction that we're able to. We took a policy decision. A day after Simchas Torah, we had a staff meeting. We took a policy decision not to alter the learning program, not to switch from Baba Kama to Tanis or whatever. Baruch Hashem, I give the Chevra high marks for doing it. So that was on one level. The other level, deep tragic pain. What can I say? It's been painful. It remains painful. It's I'm like I say, I don't want to talk about myself, but it's I think it's true of the whole staff, and it's been painful. Now, however, there's one point, and I want to give before the buzzer buzzes. If you read, and has to do with the article, but also with contemporary society.
Yes.
Everyone reads this article and they view it as a justification of Hesder. And he wrote there. Now, you mentioned the Chesed part. I disagree with the Chesed part appeals to me less, but doesn't matter. That's a minor point in this broader discussion. Everyone views it. Rav Lichtenstein wrote an article detailing justifying Hesder. But if you read the first 2, 3, 4 pages, there's also something else which is foreign to contemporary Israeli ears and souls, which is he sees a gulf, a chasm between the world of Beit Midrash and the world of the army. He talks there time and time again how we moved here from Plato's militarism and how military education has nothing to offer about yeshiva, and that the army is a world of violence and power and yeshiva's refinement, and he's very, very critical there of the whole military culture and etc. Personally, I served in the army. He didn't. I did not find much of that in my personal experience. There's very little that Tzal is a Yiddish, it's a Yiddish Medina, it's a Yiddish tzava, and at the end of the day, I went to a wedding 2 months ago. We together. I met there. One of the members of my tank crew, together with our mefaked. He was a mempei, mefaked pluga. We took a picture together as best friends. There was no the sense of distance and discipline. No, everyone gets along with everybody. I never felt that there's this kind of alienation to the culture of the army. I never felt that. I felt much more Rav Vital, who did serve in the army. Rav Vital loved to quote two Gemaras. One of them is Gemara Shabbos, Kufid Gimel, Kufid Daled. ופשטת בגדיו ולבש בגדים אחרים, מכאן השני בגדים מן התורה. And he spoke about how a person transitions from one set of garments to another, which of course means not only changing your shirt, but like you go into a telephone booth and you emerge with a different role and a different. We talk often about how the Kohen Gadol goes and because you constantly transition between different roles, but seamlessly. The Kohen Gadol goes and he changes from one set to another, and it's integrated. And I'm not sure I identify with that integration. And the other Gemara I like to quote, one Moed Katan, it says about Adino HaAtzani, is one of David HaMelech's Giborim, that the Gemara Darshans, why is he called Adino HaAtzani? Shekiyoshe Bet HaMidrash Me'adein Atzmo Ketolat. In the Besmeder, she was refined and gentle. When he goes to war, he's tough and battle hardened. Rav Vital often these are slogans of his which I found very appealing and which really reflected our experience. However, and I have spoken about this publicly in the past few months. I feel that in the past few years that religious Zionism is sliding dangerously into a culture in which power and strength become values. The fact that you have a party which calls itself Otzma Yehudi, Jewish power, and the good deal. Let's like this: they're always throughout all the wars throughout. There are always problems and there are always issues in which people something strayed from orders and acted in ways which they should not have. Nevertheless, I think the past war, the culture of believing the culture of strength and power and violence was much more embedded culture in the army, and I think not positively. In other words, I think it would be a very good exercise for people to go back now and read those opening parts about the tension between military might
and militarism.
And then because I think religious Zionism, Chas v'Shalom, I think that you can see a lot of it's like this at the very least warning lights blinking, if not worse than that. I'm not going into details now, but I can say that being here, I've heard stories that I will not repeat in public, which certainly have certainly room for deep concern. But look, I think just look at the government. Look at just the pronouncements of the government itself, and and the person quote unquote prosecuting the war gallant. It's an ethos of power and of might, and I feel that people be my father may not. I don't think it actually represented what we saw 30, 40 years ago, but I do think Chacham Adif Min Avi, that he's the dangers he pointed out. I think because of nationalism and the like. Yes, I think there's a lot of danger that we should be a good exercise to teach high school kids and post high school kids those first 4 pages independent, and to stop this
But
romanticization, this romanticizing power and romanticizing might, b'chol makom she'rotzei gvurato, shema ta motzei in v'tanuto.
well, so I'm glad that I did tempt you to make a more global statement about trends in larger society, but I also admire the fact that you brought it back to an educational challenge to us within our own community. It'll be many years, I think, until we can understand the impact of the events since October 7th, since Simchat Torah, until whenever it will end. We're on day 345 of the war. There are still 100 hostages, living and dead, held in Gaza. The count, as I understand it, is 1,653 Jewish souls have perished since October 7th, both soldier and civilian. And we all hope with the coming new year, Tichle Shana V'Kilotea, that this will all come to an end so that we can begin to make sense of it. But for helping us to begin that work of trying to make sense of this, we are very grateful to you, Rav Mosheh Lichtenstein. Thank you for
You
joining.
allow me just to add, I just
Sure.
wanted to brief comments. First of all, I'd say like this: you're 1,000% right that we many years to understand, but I'd say even more than that. It's an ongoing incident, what they call Hayura Lo Nigmar. The event is still ongoing. So it's not only that we only later on we understand. What we do now will impact it. There are many crossroads ahead of us, and how we choose at these crossroads. In other words, you can take with the point we're standing at now, and you can connect the dots to many different paths. You can choose different paths. These will not only impact upon what will happen, they'll also impact on what happened. What transpired will take some immediate significance from the choices that we will make into the future, and the future will, in a sense, serve to forge and to interpret the past as well. So I think we have a tremendous challenge to continue making the correct choices to the best that you can. This fog of war, not only in identifying, an airplane or an artillery piece, this fog of war also regarding these, but we have to be very careful to, in these choices, it's an ongoing event. I do, and I'll just conclude. I certainly join everything you said about Tichle Shana V'Kilotea. It should be a much better year, and because Baruch should give us. But okay, I don't want to sound like a doomsayer, but I do think that we have to take into note. I think we should stop religious Zionism has a tendency to romanticize because it's the Chalta de Geulah. I think people should ask themselves very difficult questions. Where is the historical arc taking us? And maybe it's, in other words, if you look at history, look where we are now. Chaz v'shalom. We've if you look if you don't come with a preconceived notion or with spectacles to which this is Geulah, you could be seeing Chaz v'shalom the reverse. I think we should be aware that history isn't always rosy, and that we should do our best
to bend that historical arc.
That the historical take into account that history can cut both ways, and I think religious Zionism tends to romanticize much to the second point. I'll just add a point my father makes over there also. At the end of the day, the Hesder movement and his institution and his Ramital's institution, other institutions, I think have been able to realize the goal. To prove, and not to prove, but simply to produce people who are Talmidei Chachamim, who serve who can serve Am Yisrael in the army. That you can be a Talmid Chacham even though you've served in the army. That you can be. I think Baruch Hashem here from Mital fulfilled their dream, and they could they produce Talmidim who can learn the Ramban, and had the Ramban come, he would have been glad to give Bechina and see where these Talmidim have I think they vindicated. There's a lot of challenges which have to do with modern orthodoxy in general. I'm not saying every yeshiva has the same level and same intensity of every non-yeshiva every yeshiva non-has there. But I think yes, we can certainly hold our own in many fronts. And Baruch Hashem, we produced many fine Talmidei Chachamim, and B'ezrat Hashem, hopefully we'll continue to produce. And my father's guidance, or Mital's guidance, and all the other Sheshivot is there will continue to guide us.
I will add your name to that list of those that are guiding us.
I've removed.
May we be zoche to bend that arc of history towards a better place for ourselves and for our nation and for the world. We thank you for these insights, which of course are so important to us now at this time, and to your voice, everything you've said until now, and what you will say and guide and teach us going forward. May we be zoche to Shana Tova Harbe Yoter.
I just said that to everybody in the Zoom. Kiva v'chatima tova, and
please.
And
Thank you, Rav Moshe. Please join us at traditiononline.org, where you can access Rav Aharon Lichtenstein's article, The Ideology of Hesder, along with his many other contributions to our pages. You can also sample the open access archives of our special 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, which arrived tragically to particular relevance that we had not planned when we wrote those essays, but which are nevertheless quite informative now as we stand a half century later in ways that are both eerily similar and different. Thank you to the Rabbinical Council of America, our publisher, to Rabbi Menachem Penner, to Rabbi Tzvi Engel, and all of the leadership of our parent body.
I'll give you a bonus anecdote if you give me the 20 seconds.
There you go. For the special subscribers.
When I was in 1981, and then the year this essay was published, I was a soldier. I took a picture. Someone took a picture of me and standing in the gate of the Machane, living in B'Shara Machane. I sent it to the Rav. I was told that he recoiled a bit.
Explain. Machane was the army newspaper.
No. Yeah, but no. This was in the Machane of Gedud 195. It was in Ro'in. It was in Bekaot in Bekat. It was the Bekat at the time. And I sent to the Rav. I was young and handsome with a holding a gun. I was told by someone there, one of the people who he's still very badirashelo, that he recoiled from the picture a bit. That he's been taken aback, because even though in theory he gives great drasha about chayalim, but seeing his grandson in uniform with a gun was a bit he was a bit unprepared for that. So I don't know. The story tells that I don't know. I wasn't that he called Beck in 1983 and told him I'm calling as a grandfather and not as a gadol ador to advocate for something. I wasn't there. I was in Lebanon, so I can't say for sure. But I was told that that's how he called, and so okay. Yeah. Okay, that's it.
Well, I think all of us who've seen their sons put on madim can understand the Rav's response. It's a combination of pride and a combination of horror, and we hope that our children and grandchildren will not have to endure the same. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.